On the night of the 31st of January, 1997, Stephen Edenfield, a 41-year-old man from Tampa, Florida, spent a normal evening having dinner with his brother, James, and his sister. The meal was nothing out of the ordinary, a simple family gathering that no one knew would be the last time they would all be together. Afterward, Stephen returned to his condo at the Tampa Racket Club condominium complex on North Church Avenue. However, something went terribly wrong that night. After returning home, Stephen left again around midnight, returning to the condo at approximately 12:50 a.m. on the 1st of February. At this time, Stephen spoke to the security guard at the entrance, explaining that he had lost his remote to enter the complex. He also mentioned that the car behind him was with him, which led the security guard to let both cars in. Unfortunately, the security guard was unable to get a good look at who was in the other car. After entering the complex, Stephen went inside his condo, completely unaware of the tragic events about to unfold. The next morning, on the 1st of February, 1997, at 9:30 a.m., James Edenfield went to check on his brother after Stephen failed to show up at their mother's home, as he had planned. James was concerned and decided to go to Stephen's condo to make sure everything was okay. When James arrived at the condo, he found the door to his brother's apartment closed but unlocked. Feeling a sense of unease, he called out to his brother, but there was no response. James cautiously entered the condo, only to be met with a shocking sight. There were signs of a violent struggle. Blood was splattered across the hallway, and pieces of a broken statue littered the floor. The scene indicated that something horrific had happened. As James continued through the condo, he found Stephen's lifeless body in the bedroom, lying in his bed, covered in blood and cold to the touch. Stephen had been brutally murdered. James immediately left the condo and went to the front office to call 911. Deputies arrived shortly afterward. They found Stephen lying on his back, naked, with obvious upper body trauma. It was clear he had been stabbed and beaten. There were bloodstains on the headboard of the bed, and chillingly, the word greed was written in blood on one of the bedroom walls. A blood-stained white tank top was found in the bedroom, along with 2 white socks, also blood-stained, near the couch in the living room. Despite the initial evidence pointing to a violent crime, no arrests were made, and the case went cold. For years, the Edenfield family had to live with the pain of not knowing who had ended Stephen's life. Tragically, Stephen's mother and 2 sisters passed away without ever knowing the identity of the person responsible. Stephen's family was left in the dark, waiting for any information that might bring them closure. As the years passed, the case seemed to slip further into obscurity, with no answers in sight. However, in 2022, 25 years after the crime, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit decided to reopen the investigation. With advances in DNA technology, the team hoped they could finally bring justice to Stephen and his family. Investigators re-examined the evidence, including the blood-stained socks and tank top that had been preserved from the crime scene. The DNA tests revealed that, while the blood on these items was Stephen's, there was also an unknown DNA profile present. This new development reignited hope in the case. The unknown DNA profile was entered into the FBI's national database, and on the 10th of January, 2024, a match was found. The DNA was linked to a 2005 battery case in Waukegan, Illinois, in which Brandon Gliha had been the suspect. Gliha, now 47, was living in Tampa at the time. He had been arrested just weeks earlier on an unrelated forgery warrant out of Illinois. Investigators from the Cold Case Unit traveled to Illinois to interview Gliha, and during the interview, Gliha confessed to Stephen Edenfield's murder. Gliha's confession provided chilling details about the night of the 1st of February, 1997. According to Gliha, he had been picked up by a man named Chino in a dark brown Monte Carlo. Together, they followed Stephen to his condo. Gliha claimed that Chino had arranged for them to meet with Stephen, promising a sexual encounter. Afterward, Gliha said he felt violated and angry. He explained that he overheard an argument between Chino and Stephen about payment for the encounter. Enraged, Gliha grabbed a porcelain statue from the living room and threw it at Stephen. When Stephen pushed him, Gliha punched him in retaliation. According to Gliha, that's when Chino came from behind and stabbed Stephen. Gliha said that Chino continued to stab Stephen and hit him with a blunt object, making sure Stephen couldn't identify them or expose them to the authorities. After the brutal attack, Gliha claimed that he wiped down the condo, searching for anything to steal since they hadn't been paid for their services. Despite his confession, Gliha maintained that he did not stab Stephen or physically touch him, aside from throwing the statue and punching him. His story was inconsistent, and DNA evidence contradicted his claims. The DNA found on the socks and tank top from the crime scene was a match to Gliha, and investigators arrested him on charges of first-degree murder and robbery with a weapon. The Edenfield family had waited for nearly 3 decades for justice. On the 24th of February, 2025, Hillsborough County detectives knocked on James Edenfield's door with the long-awaited news. The case had finally been solved, and Gliha was being charged with Stephen's murder. It was a moment that brought a bittersweet sense of closure to the Edenfield family. Sheriff Chad Chronister, in a statement, said, "For 28 years, Stephen's family has waited for answers. Today, we can finally give them some measure of peace. No family should have to endure this kind of pain for so long. While nothing can erase the loss they have suffered, we hope knowing that justice has been served brings them comfort." James Edenfield, who had spent years wondering who was responsible for his brother's death, was shocked by the confession. I was shocked to learn of the confession. I was not expecting it to happen in my lifetime. But I guess it is like I told them, what goes around comes around, he said. For the Edenfield family, the resolution of Stephen's case nearly 3 decades later provided a small measure of peace. Though Stephen's mother and 2 sisters were not alive to see justice served, the case's resolution brought the family one step closer to healing. Modern forensic science, along with the tireless work of law enforcement, demonstrated that even the coldest of cases could eventually be solved, offering closure to victims and their families. No matter how many years had passed, the story of Stephen Edenfield serves as a powerful reminder of the persistence of justice, the importance of never giving up, and the hope that even the most long-forgotten cases can be solved. For the Edenfield family, after years of uncertainty and heartache, they could finally lay their beloved Stephen to rest, knowing that the truth had been uncovered. In July 1992, Michelle Miller vanished without a trace. The 29-year-old U.S. Army veteran and mother of 2 had lived a troubled life shaped by addiction, yet she remained a devoted mother navigating her challenges the best she could. She was last seen alive in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and 2 weeks later, her lifeless body was discovered in the basement of an abandoned apartment. The neighbor who made the call had noticed a foul odor, an eerie sign that something was terribly wrong. Michelle's body bore the marks of violence. She had been abused, and investigators immediately suspected foul play. Her children, Daniel and his sister, were already in foster care at the time. With little evidence to go on, no eyewitnesses, and limited forensics, the case soon went cold, buried under decades of silence and unanswered questions. That silence was broken more than 30 years later. On the 16th of December, 2024, investigators from the Middlesex District Attorney's Office made a surprising announcement. 65-year-old Edward Watson of Mattapan had been charged with Michelle's murder. According to District Attorney Marion Ryan, this was not just a case of violent rage, it was a murder-for-hire plot. The person allegedly behind it? Michelle's ex-partner and the father of her children, Daniel Innes. Authorities believe Innes hired Watson to kill Michelle amid a bitter custody battle over their children. Just a day before she disappeared, Michelle had told a social worker she intended to file a restraining order against Innes. Then, she vanished, and her body turned up not long after. But Daniel Irvin, Michelle and Innes's son, isn't convinced. Now, in adulthood and reflecting on the case that defined the beginning of his life, Daniel expressed his doubts about the official narrative. "I have strong feelings that my dad did not ask this guy to do it," he said in response to the murder-for-hire claims. He was shocked to see the term "Slaying for hire" splashed across headlines. "It's kind of weird," he said. "It doesn't reflect the reality I knew." Daniel's relationship with his biological parents had always been strained. Both had struggled with addiction. Daniel and his sister were placed in foster care at a young age, and their adoptive mother raised them after Michelle's death. Yet Daniel bore no hatred. "Choices were made," he said, "but I do not harbor any ill will." Before his father's death in 2012, Daniel reconnected with him. They had honest, difficult conversations. He even asked his father directly if he had played a role in Michelle's death. "I was like, 'This is what I've heard. Did you do it?' His father's response, "Me and your mom hit each other and all that stuff, but I would never hurt her in that way." Though Daniel acknowledges that his father went to prison for a separate manslaughter charge and had confessed to other crimes, he doesn't believe this was one of them. "If my dad had wanted her dead," he said, "he would have done it himself." The case against Edward Watson relies largely on interviews and social worker records, according to early court filings. During one police interview, Watson reportedly admitted he had been in the apartment at the time of Michelle's death. First, he claimed he hit her with his fists. Later, he said he used a stick or a board. Prosecutor David Solette stated that Watson only admitted this detail in a third interview, decades after the murder. It was a revelation, but also raised concerns. How reliable was Watson's memory, and why now? Despite these questions, the district attorney's office believes they have enough to move forward. "We are confident that we have sufficient evidence," said Marion Ryan. "And the evidence indicates that he, Watson, committed this crime allegedly at the behest of Mr. Innes." Still, the complexities of memory, trauma, and time cast shadows over the case. Daniel Irvin wants justice for his mother, but he also wants truth, not headlines. "I'm happy the cold case team solved the case and arrested somebody," he said. "But the way they are portraying everything is not reality." On March 2025, Edward Watson was arraigned in Middlesex Superior Court. The judge ordered that he remain held without bail. His next court appearance was set for the 16th of April, 2025, and with it comes the hope that the final chapter of Michelle Miller's story may, at last, be written in full. On an ordinary spring morning in 1979, silence settled like a shroud over a modest home on Binney Street in Omaha, Nebraska. Inside that house, time stood still for a young mother and her child. What should have been a quiet Tuesday turned into a day of horror, one that would echo unanswered through the decades. Roshia Matthews was just 26 years old, a vibrant, community-minded woman. She had a degree in music and psychology from Jackson State University. She had dreams, big ones, not just for herself but for her 7-year-old son, Kamal. By all accounts, she was the kind of mother who was warm, protective, and intentional about giving her son a life filled with love, education, and opportunity. Kamal, in return, was a bright-eyed second grader with a love for comic books and his bicycle, the kind of child who left a spark in every room he walked into. But on the 24th of April, 1979, both their lives were violently cut short. Pinky Foster, Roshia's mother, had grown worried when she couldn't reach her daughter. It wasn't like them to go silent. Roshia was dependable. When police officers responded to a welfare check around 8 a.m., Pinky met them at the house, hoping, perhaps, it was just a miscommunication. Instead, she and the officers walked into a devastating scene. The house appeared ransacked, drawers pulled out, contents scattered, but it was what lay behind closed doors that shattered any illusion of a simple break-in. In one of the bedrooms, Kamal was found lifeless, strangled, a child's body robbed of its future. Down in the basement, Roshia was discovered partially unclothed, also strangled, and showing signs of sexual assault. The brutality and intimacy of the murders pointed to something far more personal than a random home invasion. It wasn't just violence, it was betrayal. And then came the long silence. Despite the vicious nature of the crime and some early leads, the investigation stalled. Police believed the killer wasn't a stranger. One name kept surfacing: Lewis Walker, a man Roshia had met around 1975 at a community event. He had been seen at her home multiple times, But the relationship, if there was one, remained undefined. Walker denied romantic involvement, and without forensic tools to confirm suspicions, investigators had nothing solid to charge him. The case slowly faded into cold storage. But grief doesn't follow the same clock as the courts. Those who knew the Matthews family never stopped wondering. The hope for justice never truly died, it just dimmed. 25 years later, in 2004, that hope flickered back to life. Walker, who had since changed his name to Abdulmalik Hussein and moved to Colorado, was arrested on unrelated burglary charges. His DNA was collected and entered into the National Database for Criminal Offenders. What came back stunned everyone. A match to biological evidence recovered from Roshia Matthews' body in 1979. It should have been the turning point, the missing link, the long-awaited moment when science and justice met. But a devastating clerical error unraveled everything. The charges were dismissed in 2005 due to procedural mistakes, court documents mishandled, motions filed improperly. Hussein walked free again, and the Matthews file slid back into silence. Still, that DNA match wasn't forgotten. Investigators held on to it. Quietly, the file remained open, waiting for the right moment. In 2021, the Omaha Police Department's cold case unit returned to it. Forensic science had advanced. New techniques could extract profiles from degraded samples, revealing what older labs couldn't. Investigators resubmitted items from the crime scene, and this time, the results were ironclad. The DNA pointed to Hussein once again, with more clarity, more weight, enough to build a fresh case despite the passage of decades. On the 8th of February, 2025, authorities arrested Abdulmalik Hussein. This time, they were determined not to let paperwork bury justice. Now in his 70s, Hussein was charged with 2 counts of murder and denied bond. The evidence was consistent with ligature strangulation. No confession was given, and no motive has ever been definitively established. Investigators believe there may have been a complicated or possibly intimate dynamic between Hussein and Roshia, but whether it was rooted in jealousy, rejection, or something darker remains unclear. More haunting than the unanswered, why is the absence of anyone left to answer it to? By 2025, there were no surviving immediate family members. Pinky Foster, the mother who first sounded the alarm, had passed away. No one was left to appear in court, to give tearful victim impact statements, or to see the wheels of justice turn in real time. There will be no family rose in the courtroom, no sibling testimony, no candlelight vigils. In a way, only the evidence speaks now, and the quiet determination of the detectives who never gave up. The story of Roshia and Kamal Matthews is a tragedy not just for the brutality they suffered, but for the delay in their dignity being restored. It's a story of justice postponed, but not abandoned. A reminder of how easily systems can fail, and how long the road to accountability can be. Yet it's also a testament to what can happen when people keep pushing. When investigators revisit the past, when science grows sharper, when someone still cares, even after everyone else has moved on. Omaha Police Chief Todd Schmaderer called the arrest a testament to the never-ending pursuit of justice. And he's right. For a young mother with dreams and the boy who followed her into the light too soon, it was long overdue. Ray Neal lived quietly in Lawrenceville, Georgia, a man in his early 60s who enjoyed simple routines and the quiet presence of family. He wasn't a headline name, nor someone whose life was expected to intersect with crime or mystery. But in July 2019, everything changed, not just for Ray, but for the people who loved him. His sister, Michelle Smalls, knew something was wrong. Ray hadn't been answering his phone for days, which was unusual. He was steady, consistent, the kind of man who returned calls and checked in. So when she decided to visit his home on the 20th of July, 2019, what she found shattered her world. The moment Michelle stepped inside, she knew something was terribly wrong. Blood was everywhere, pooled on the floor, streaked across the walls, even splattered on the shower curtain. The gruesome scene suggested violence, not illness. Her instincts told her this wasn't natural, but the initial response from authorities told a different story. When paramedics and investigators arrived, the medical examiner made a call that would delay justice by years. Ray Neal's death was ruled natural. No foul play, no further investigation, no autopsy that would suggest otherwise. The case was quietly shelved. To those outside the family, it seemed like another tragic, quiet death. But to Michelle Smalls and the rest of Ray's loved ones, it made no sense. How could a natural death leave that much blood? How could a man die peacefully and leave behind a scene that looked like something out of a horror film? The truth began to unravel thanks to someone often overlooked in these stories, a funeral home employee. While preparing Neal's body for burial, the staffer noticed something deeply troubling: multiple stab wounds. This wasn't a stroke. This wasn't a heart attack. This was murder. The revelation forced Gwinnett County authorities to reopen the case. The death was reclassified as a homicide, and what should have been a swift investigation began. But instead of resolution, the case slipped into silence. For nearly 4 years, Ray Neal's murder remained unsolved. Tips dried up, leads went cold, evidence sat dormant in a case file that was quietly aging. To the world, Ray became another name among the growing list of America's unsolved murders. But his family never let go. They kept asking questions, kept remembering what they saw, kept believing that someone out there knew more. In 2024, 5 years after his murder, a family member reignited the search for justice. They reached out to the Gwinnett County Police Department's Cold Case Unit, bringing with them not only memories but a name: Carmen Marie Hunt. The family had suspicions about Hunt, a woman with a documented history of violence and a chillingly similar case in her past. In 2022, Hunt had been arrested and imprisoned after stabbing another individual. The details bore an eerie resemblance to what had happened to Ray. Intrigued and motivated, investigators reopened Neal's file with fresh eyes and modern tools. Evidence from the scene was re-examined, and new interviews were conducted. Forensic scientists combed through every scrap of preserved material, looking for something, anything, that could link a suspect to Ray's murder. Then came the turning point: a bloody fingerprint found at the crime scene. It had been collected early on but never matched. Now, with Hunt's prints in the system due to her 2022 arrest, investigators made the connection. The fingerprint was hers. On the 8th of January, 2025, nearly 5.5 years after Ray Neal was found dead, Carmen Marie Hunt was arrested and charged with felony murder and aggravated assault. She was 50 years old and living in Gwinnett County. The arrest stunned many. For years, Hunt had remained under the radar, even after serving time for another stabbing. But to those who knew her past and saw the evidence now presented, it felt inevitable. Hunt was denied bond and remains in custody at the Gwinnett County Jail. The legal proceedings will unfold in the coming months. But for the Neal family, this moment marks something they feared would never come: a day of accountability. For Ray Neal's loved ones, the arrest was both cathartic and devastating. The confirmation of what they suspected all along didn't erase the pain of the years lost. His niece, Ashley Haynes, said it best: "I prayed. I thanked God, because I didn't think this day would come." Ray's death had never been just a headline for his family. It was an open wound, a daily question, a battle between faith and frustration. They had watched the system initially fail him, declaring his brutal murder natural, leaving his killer unchallenged for years. They never stopped believing the truth would surface. Ray Neal's case underscores something deeply troubling within the American justice system: the fragility of early assumptions. Had the medical examiner performed a proper autopsy, the case may have never gone cold. Had authorities followed up on the crime scene's obvious signs of violence, Hunt might have been caught years earlier. Instead, it took the diligence of a funeral home worker, the perseverance of a grieving family, and the sharp intuition of a cold case unit to bring the truth to light. These missteps weren't just clerical. They cost time, peace, and trust. They allowed a killer to remain free. Lost in the forensic details and legal jargon is the human being at the heart of this story. Ray Neal wasn't just a victim. He was a brother, an uncle, a neighbor. Those who knew him describe a man who was dependable, quiet, and kind. He didn't live a flashy life or make enemies. That's part of why his death shocked so many, because there seemed to be no reason behind it. But violence, as this case reminds us, doesn't always have a reason. Sometimes it just has a name. And in Ray's case, it was Carmen Hunt. While Hunt's arrest offers a form of closure, it doesn't erase what happened. Ray Neal's family still grapples with the pain of his loss. They still relive the day they found him. They still wonder what might have changed if the truth had been seen sooner. Yet, there is something powerful in knowing the story is no longer suspended in silence. There is peace in answers, even when they hurt. And there is hope that by telling stories like Ray's, we prevent other cases from slipping through the cracks. Justice delayed isn't always justice denied.